Well, welcome everybody. Another RTI Speed Tips with Bob and Chad. We were just thinking that we were supposed to be here last week, and they had some of the Facebook issues we didn't really want to deal with. And then we missed a week in there before, and Chad and I were just talking about it, that we haven't actually been on the show here since Super Nationals. So there's been a lot of stuff that's happened since then. We had the Super Nationals, and one thing that was pretty neat. Uh, I thought about the Super Nationals this year was we had a lot of first-time winners, a lot of young winners this year, 16-year-old and definitely from the youth side of things. So that was pretty exciting. Gives our sport an extra boost of what's to come for the future. So that was pretty cool. Weather was outstanding. Best Super Nationals I can remember. Of course, keep in mind that my memory's not that great anymore, but best Super Nationals I can remember for a long time. As far as how the enjoyable part of it, from being a vendor and from the weather part of it, and the racers and just everybody, it just seemed like it was a great show. And we backed it up with a week after that with the races at Marshalltown. That went all really good, World Nationals, and so a lot of good shows. Last weekend was Batesville for the modifieds, and so we've had a lot of great shows since then, and we haven't really had much of a chance to talk about them. What's new and exciting at Wehrs Machine?
Oh, not much. We're plugging away. We're still trying to recover from Super Nationals and get everything put away and keep her rolling. And we're starting to look at the winter projects, like the catalog and the new products, and we're trying to get all the new products finalized and get everything ready for 2022 and just keep moving forward.
Awesome. Yeah, we're kind of in that same process, not necessarily doing a catalog, but kind of going through some of the little things that we need to do and kind of doing some of that yearly maintenance and doing some painting here and there in the building and just doing some TLC stuff that we don't normally have time to do during the summer hours. And of course, the shop has remained busy, and those guys, Rocky and Jonathan and Aiden, have all been busy working, getting cars out. And so we've got two complete cars sitting here waiting to go home and that are done and ready to go. And we'll have another one by the end of the weekend. So it's been pretty good. We're starting to slow up here as far as getting stuff out the door. The shop's starting to shrink a little bit here. So we're going to have to get some customers picking up some of the stuff. And then in a week here, we've got 4 more cars we've got to go down to GRT and get. So Garrett's going to get to make his monthly trip to GRT. He's our official chassis driver. He goes and picks up the cars and brings them back. And so far, he's the only one that has not complained about going to GRT, because there's nothing wrong with GRT, but it's that 10-hour drive that doesn't do everybody very well. So that's kind of been going good, and so yeah, that's been going pretty good. Hi Jerry. Yeah, Tim, I agree with you. Boone was a good time. I'm glad you guys were able to visit with us. I was amazed, the number of people that came up and talked to us about the show at the Super Nationals. I met a lot of people that from all over the country that were there that come up and watch the show. And gosh, where was I? Must have, I was on a phone call today from a guy that I didn't know or anything like that, and he was asking me some questions and stuff, and finally it dawned on me that he must be an RTI speed tip watcher. And so I talked about that. He said, "Oh yeah, I've missed a show." And I said, "Well, we're going to be doing one this. We're going to finally actually get back to doing one this coming tonight." So hopefully he's watching. How much left side weight is too much in an iStock? Well, with the tires that you guys can run, that's a little bit better deal. You got a little better tire than what we can run up here. I would say 54% with the drivers, in my opinion. I wouldn't go over that. The thing with left side weight, you always have to remember left side weight uh, can hurt the car a little bit on corner entry and in the middle of the corner. So phase one and phase two, if the car doesn't roll and doesn't get side bite like it should, it can hurt the car a little bit. If you can maintain side bite getting in and through the middle, left side weight helps the car drive off the corner like a bandit. So the left side weight works great in phase three of the corner as long as you can make sure that it works good in phase one and phase two. But my normal recommendation would be 54% with the driver. Those cars have, they don't really have a super high center of gravity, not like our IMCA stock cars. Those cars we run try to stay right around 52%. So suggestion to even the tire wear up on street stock. No left tire wear currently. Hi Joe, how's everything going in Boone, Iowa tonight? The left side, I'm not sure what to tell you on that. I would probably try to increase my left side percentage by moving a little bit of weight over on that left rear tire. I don't have the street stock knowledge or I should say the experience. I've got one gentleman that works here that has done very well and with his street stock. I think he was 5th at the Super Nationals this year with it. So he's had a good year with his street stock. I'll have to ask him about that and see what kind of things he's been doing. Him and Bobby talk a lot about that stuff, and I don't get in on a lot of those street stock conversations. Yeah, Cody, good point. Just keep putting more bite in the car. The more bite you put in the car, of course, it's going to be a little freer getting in, so you just have to kind of plan accordingly on that and adjust for that also. We, like I said earlier, the shop has been pretty busy, but we're in that time now where we took inventory right before the end of September, so we had inventory numbers for the first 3 quarters, so that was pretty good. Hoping that if that all came out good, that maybe we wouldn't do a year-end inventory. I haven't actually looked at all of the numbers yet, but it looked like it came out pretty good, so I was pretty happy with that. And so we're just kind of doing a lot of those tedious jobs that you don't seem to ever get time to. And it's just like you and I were talking earlier, nowadays a lot of the guys are still guys that are running, still going to be racing some more. I mean, they got that big race in Batesville for the stock cars this weekend. And of course, Las Vegas will be the middle of November. So there's still going to be some races coming up. The thing is, though, a lot of us are doing those, well, they're not necessarily honeydew for me, but painting the shed and staining the deck and doing some of that pre-fall stuff that you don't get done during the summer because, first of all, if you did have time to do it, you really don't want to do it because it's too hot. And second of all, it just seems like it's a good time of the year. This is just, pleasurable weather. Today was a little chilly. Otherwise, today's actually been the first chilly day I think we've had that I can remember. I mean, today was the day where I kept my sweatshirt on most of the day. So that was pretty interesting. How much is too much right rear spring with a soft left rear spring? I've heard guys, depending on, I'm not really sure what you're, if you're talking about stock car, if you're talking about a modified or a sport mod, but I've heard a lot of guys with the 300. We normally run a 250. Sometimes we still stay with the 225. Kind of depends with the modified. I've not really run a lot of stiff stuff, but I know there's some guys out there that do run as much as a 300-pound right rear spring with that soft. But I think the 300-pound right rear springs those guys are usually more in the 80 to 100-pound rate. So I would say with a 125, 250 is pretty realistic. IMCA stock car. With an IMCA stock car, yeah, I would say 250, 275. I know there's guys out there running 300s. I know that for a fact because I've talked to some of them. But anyway, Chad, when your guys are going to have those trick billet setup plates added to your website, could not stop staring at them on Bo Partain's Modified. Well, that was our plan, was to get everybody staring at those plates. So I'm glad that worked. It's always nice to know that our ingenious ideas work out. So anyway, he was wanting to know when those plates are going to be on your website.
Yeah, we kind of have turned Boone into our official new product launch party, and so we just made a couple sets to get them there so we could show them off. The production run is in line. I would say probably, hopefully by the end of the month, we'll have them ready to rock and roll. We've been selling quite a few of them, and I think they're going to be a pretty good deal. They're a little expensive, but you'll never have to buy another piece moving forward. Because they're built to last. They're thick. They don't flex at all, and of course we made them adjustable for tire size so that you can have the stagger built in, so your suspension setup is as accurate as is with your race tires on. So they're pretty cool. We're excited about them. They should be up by the end of the month, I would think. I know we're having a little trouble getting some aluminum in different areas, and they're starting to ration aluminum, so we're kind of frantically trying to buy material for next July, and so these are big materials. So, but hopefully by the end of the month, I think that material is actually here, so should be pretty quick.
Chad, what's the procedure for general maintenance procedure for the birdcage and when bearings should be replaced? Ours are 2 years old.
So we recommend, every maximum 10 nights. I'd like to see 5 would be better, where you unhook the 4-link rods and the shock and spin the cage and relocate the grease, and then that puts your hands on it. So when you spin that and you're touching that cage, you're gonna feel any little glitches in that bearing, any catches, and you can rock it side to side and feel if the bearing's getting loose. We don't really have a protocol for how many years they last. I think it has to do with how well you maintain your car, and not spraying the water directly at it when you're cleaning it, and keeping the rust off the bearing, and proper maintenance will extend the longevity. So I mean, if they're 2 years old, I'm not worried about that as long as they feel good. Some other people think you should change them every year, and if you want to do that, that's fine. I mean, like I said, we just tell people to feel them with your hands, and if there's anything wrong, you're going to feel it. So
yeah, you definitely will pick right up on that. If that thing has any chatter to it or whatever, it's time for new bearings.
Yeah, this is the year-end maintenance now, ripping the cars apart and going through everything and sending your shocks into Bob and getting everything. Hard to believe we're already talking about 2022, but
it is amazing. And we've got some guys out here. Well, we've actually had 3 cars in here for repairs already for next year. In and out of here, guys wanting stuff updated, and so they updated it, so now they can take it home and they can start going through everything. And now's the time of the year, because it's just like everything. Your car's good at the beginning of the year, and as the race goes on, it seems like your cars are still good, but maybe your finishes aren't as good, and it's that old deal. When you get to that time of the year where you start taking everything apart, feeling everything and making sure everything is right, and putting everything back together with fresh heim joints and fresh parts, the car will be back to where it was when it originally was. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about here this next 3 months. And we're going to start going once a month on the shows. And so our next show is going to be November 8th, and then we'll have December 6th. And more than likely, we'll probably throw in an extra show there on Christmas, just because of the Santa Claus thing and stuff like that. But just what the heck, it's December, so everybody's busy out shopping, and so while they're shopping, we need to talk racing. Trevor, hey guys, I'm going to run chain limiters on both sides of my rear end of my Northern Sport Mod for the first time. What's a good start set at them. As far as, what I recommend, and everybody has a different theory, but when you have your trailing arm, say, if your trailing arms, say your trailing arm, your left rear trailing arm in the static position measures 25 degrees of angle, then what I would recommend is when you put your original chain on, you jack up underneath the seat of the driver and you get it to the point where that trailing arm's angle is about 45 degrees. And that's where you need to start with your chain. We could give you measurements, but it all depends on the frame. Some guys say 4 inches a drop, some guys say 5 inches a drop, and it all depends on where you're measuring the drop from to be able to, to use a certain number. So I kind of coordinate it with the angle of that trailing arm. I don't want to see that angle of that left trailing arm going over 45 degrees, because I believe once you go over 45 degrees, you start taking the chance of hopping the tire, and it starts getting that povo stick effect, and you don't want to do that. So that's where I would start on that. My right rear, I always start with I jack the rear end up, and I jack the frame up to the point where there's just a mini gap, an eighth of an inch gap on the right rear spring without it being touching, and I set my chain there. So that way then it doesn't completely come off the screen, off of the spring on the right rear, but it's not got any bind or any load to it, because a lot of times if you have the right rear where it's loaded, it can, on a rough racetrack, it can make the car kind of a little bit of a handful. So that would be my suggestion. Kenny's got a question, wants to know about pinion angle on an IMCA stock car. As a rule of thumb, we run 7 degrees on everything. The pinion angle on a stock car, you could probably get by with 5 degrees and be fine. But as a norm, somewhere between 5 and 7 degrees would get you where you need to be. Could you explain wedge on an IMCA A-mod where would be a good starting point on how to adjust the base off of what you feel? Well, wedge is a number that we used to use. Back in the old days, we used to, even when we did this with pavement stuff and dirt stuff, we would put a socket underneath the rear end and jack up underneath the center of the rear end, and we'd try to get the right rear tire 2 inches off the ground before the left rear tire came off the ground. In reality, some of that still somewhat can apply to that point. It just all depends. When we scale the car, as a rule of thumb on a static situation, we usually start with about a 60-pound heavier load on the left rear than we do the right rear. So as far as a starting point goes, on a dirt car, I probably, in today's world, if I was checking it old school with those socket thing, which I don't recommend, but if I was doing that, I'd probably only go 1 inch. What's your suggestion, Chad?
I think you hit it on the head.
As a rule of thumb, that's kind of a good way to a simple way to check things if you don't have scales. But if you do have scales, I'd set my car at 54% left side weight, and then start with somewhere around 60 pounds of bias in the car, where the left rear is 60 pounds higher, and then I would adjust my car to my driving style from there. Brian's got a question. He wants to know how we feel about running a straight bar driver's side of the pinion opposed to the J bar on a crate IMCA modified. Well, there's pros and cons. I believe it in this point in time, I think there's more cons to it. If you get well, first of all, like if it was an IMCA car, I'm not saying it's an IMCA car, but if it was an IMCA car, you've got a 19-inch panhard bar rule length. So to put that on the left side, you'd be mounted quite a ways to the left. Well, when you think about the closer we move it to the left tire, and then when you think about all the height that we get in that left rear, that rear end's going to move quite a bit because the frame's at a lot different angle. So we've kind of found the old neutral base is more with the J bar because that's almost in the center of the rear end. And then we run 19 to 21 inches depending on the car and the brand of the car. If you're running short tracks, all short track stuff, the 19-inch bar works pretty good. If you run bigger racetracks, I like the 21-inch bar. The longer bar is a little slower to react. You can put a little bit more angle in it, which can create hike, left rear hike in the car. That stuff will definitely 1-inch socket. Way to go, Steve. I appreciate that. Anyway, what we were talking about earlier with the straight bar, I think it's too finicky. To be honest with you, I like loading both those rear tires as equally as possible. Back to Kenny Gill's question, why do you recommend 5 to 7 degrees? I like 4, but would like to hear your reasoning. Well, it's all the, if you stick a camera underneath there, or if you can jack the car up and have it go through its motion, 4 might be perfectly fine. I've always been in that 5 to 7 degrees, especially with a modified, because when you have like with a modified, when you have a torque link or something that moves a little bit, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of movement going on back there, which you don't have with the stock car. So, in your point, 4 might be fine. Biggest thing is I would set the car up there, I'd jack it up underneath the seat, take my load stick and squish down the right front so that it's all in hike motion and all in dynamic motion, and make sure that my pinion never went past 0. I always like to make sure that the car is always still working in tractions, working in through the drive shaft. I've had some engineers that tell me none of that makes any difference, but I go back to the old torque tube of the sprint cars, and that's where their traction came from, was through the rear end from the engine directly to the rear end. And ours is, in a sense, kind of the same type of an animal, so I've always ran more. I would rather run a little bit more than a little less because I still think it can add traction to the car. My opinion. Honestly, as far as traction goes, is there any real advantage to a 4-link over a 3-link? In my opinion, I believe that there is. Reason being is because you've got more advantage to adjust rear steer in the car to get your maximum traction. Your upper bar is more of your traction bar, and so you can adjust the steer by changing the lower bar. With the 3-link, you just have the one rod, and you can't adjust them both. You can't fine tune it. I believe you can fine tune a 4-link car a lot better than a 3-link car. What's your opinion, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, the 4-link is kind of designed to get the car into the motion quicker than the 2-link car, and you don't have to run so much drastic angle to get it to go through the motion. That's kind of like where in the 2-link car, when you move the bar forward and up, you get the motion quicker without so much angle. So the advantage to the 4-link is it gets the steer, like you say, and gets the car into motion and gets it working quicker without such drastic bar angles.
Yeah, and like I said, it's just in my opinion, it's much more adjustable. Mm-hmm. Matthew, what if you have a mechanic who is old? Well, then he's right there with me. I mean, I'm my older sister the other day asked me how old I was, and so I told her, and she says, "Man, you are really getting old." And I'm thinking, what the hell? What are you talking about? You're a heck of a lot older than me. But anyway, I don't know what to tell you about that. You got to remember, he's got a tremendous amount of experience, man. There's just no doubt of the experiences. Just think of the things he said, things he's done, the experiences he's had. Now, we might not all be talking about the race car, but still, he's got a lot of stuff he could tell you. So anyway, go back to that. So okay, so Mark, will you guys set up any brand of race car with soda modified shocks and springs? Oh, by far. We work with all kinds of different brands of chassis. Um, I don't, in fact, I can't think of a real name. There's some smaller companies that, don't sell a lot of cars that, maybe work more with a specific um, shock builder, but we work with quite a few of them. We've got a lot of Wasota customers and UMP customers. We've been pretty fortunate, to be pretty nationwide. James, first of all, thanks for all the help you guys have done through the year. It really improved our program. I appreciate that, James. That's kind of our objective here, is to improve the program, because my belief is the fact, if we can improve the race cars and improve the program, it's a better experience for the fans, it's a better experience for the promoter, and it's sure as heck a better experience for the racer himself. So if he can have more fun doing what he's going to do, it's going to just carry the whole world and keep this cycle, this keep us all going in the circle that we're trying to be in. So that's the main thing. So we enjoy it. Like I said, I couldn't thank all the people that came up at the Super Nationals and talked about the RTI segment that we do, and so it's been a lot of fun. And of course, doing anything with my old buddy Chad's always a lot of fun.
We have a good time.
I have an underslung sport mod and haven't ever had a chain on the left rear. Can you talk about the advantages and disadvantages of running the chain on the left rear? Well, I can't really say there would be a huge advantage to running the chain with your frame rail being where it's at. However, most of the frame rails will have more drop in them, to the point where you might need a chain because you might be getting way too much drop, which is causing too much steer and getting too much angle on the left rear. So the chain's just going to give you something that's you can adjust, where the frame, what you have is what you have. So if you hit off the frame, it's going to be a certain amount. And I truly believe that with the chain being inboard, and of course the frame's inboard too, but I believe the car has less apt to break the tire loose when it hits the chain than it would if it hits the frame. It's just the way that whole operation works. There's a little bit of stretch in the chain, where when you hit that frame, it's done solid. So that's my opinion. And I think the advantage is you can adjust it, so you can change how much you can change how much chain you want the car to have. That was kind of a little tricky statement there for a minute. Almost got all waylaid. But anyway, you can change that and adjust it accordingly, where with it being with the underneath frame rail, you don't have that adjustability. What if you have a mechanic who is old school, is not willing to do whatever else is doing with their new cars? Well, you're just going to have to sit down and discuss with him that, let's just get out the history book, and if we did what we did 20 years ago on a lot of things, how would it work? It might not work as good, because of giving the computer as an example. It's just not the same. So you've got to kind of keep up with the times and be open-minded, and that's the big thing. Trust me, I do work with a few guys, and of course, there's not one employee here that doesn't think that sometimes I'm maybe a little too old school. And I've learned to be more open-minded, because sure enough, sometimes some of the newer stuff does work better, and you just have to learn. You just got to help him be open-minded and willing to try some of the new stuff, because you never know. Now, there's a lot of times where sometimes we still go back to some of the stuff that was tried and true before, and it still works pretty good too. But you just definitely have to be open-minded. What does moving the top left bar down on the bird cage do on a modified? I'll let you have that one, Chad.
So that's going to make the car turn into the corner better and give you traction. It's going to speed up the rotation of the cage by lowering it, getting it closer to the axle center line, and then that puts more angle in the top rod, which is drive angle, so you'll get more traction off the corner. So turn in, drive off.
I've been using a load stick on my right front most of the year, but have yet to load stick the left front. Should I be? And how should those load numbers compare to the right front? I'll let you have that one, Chad. You're the load stick man.
Yeah, I mean, the right front obviously dominates it because it gets so much more travel and it carries so much more of the load. But tuning that left front, being able to take load out and put load in there without changing spring rate is also a pretty handy tool. I don't know, most of the numbers are kind of all over the board because the left front is such a weird location for the chain. So depending on where it is and how much you let it out. But the biggest thing is to just start taking your notes, put it on there, go to your chain, see what the load is right before you hit the chain, and just build a notebook of data. And then, you can tune accordingly once you start building some data and learn what the adjustments are going to do for you, more load, less load. So I would definitely be using it on the left front. Not a lot of people do, but it is starting to get more and more popular.
Well, and the thing with the load stick there is, of course, you're not going to have near the number that you would on the right front because we're not going to load it as far. It's never going to compress anywhere near to what the right front would do. So, but I think it's really important to understand what that load does when it does hit that chain, so you can kind of, it's back to setting your chain like on the left rear, going through those load numbers of seeing where it might actually be. I have not actually done that much this year with that. That's something that I definitely is on my plan of things to do next year, because I believe there's a ton of tunability in that left front corner, especially with that chain. So I definitely would do it. And like Chad said, I would do it. Start yourself a notebook. And when the car's real good, you had a great night, I'd load stick everything, write those numbers down, and kind of start building your data file so you kind of have an idea. Todd wants to know, how do you determine if the Heim joint is good or bad, or do you just replace them after so many nights? A lot of times I kind of went with the replacing them after so many nights, but most of the time, if you keep them fairly well lubed and you started out with a good Heim joint, they're going to last you a season. I don't know if I would run like with a Heim joint. I'd probably replace them all at the end of the year. Or let's put it this way, I would probably replace them all after 45 nights or in that neighborhood. How you can really tell is just take the Heim joint off. Well, first, before you actually take it off, try to load and unload it by, jerking with the rear end or anything that has a Heim joint. You'll be able to see if that Heim joint has any play in it, because if it's got any play in it, it needs to go. Then the other thing is you can take them off and you can rotate them in the ball, and you'll feel like if you put your hand on the ball and you rotate the ball, if there's a sharp edge on that collar of that Heim joint, that's telling you that it's definitely gotten wear. So it's going to give you, you're going to be able to feel if there's any slop or whatever. If it's still really tight, doesn't have any slop in it, I really wouldn't worry about it. I mean, we replaced, had a customer that wanted all new Heims in last spring, and so we replaced them all. And honestly, half of them I think could have run another season. I mean, they actually look pretty good. But they do a good job of maintaining it and spray lubing them and keeping them lubed so that there's not a lot of friction. And you'll find that there's certain Heim joints that definitely, left rear will wear out more than others just because of the load. I think isn't there one more question above that? Yeah, Matt. Sorry, question was, what if you have a mechanic who is old school and is not willing to, oh yeah, I got that one. Sorry, never mind. Garrett was on it and I wasn't paying attention. On a sport mod or modified, the tube welded in the chassis from the cage to the right front of kick-up. Is it beneficial to mount a bar on top of that kick-up or halfway up? Does it limit flex one way or the other? Well, if I'm thinking correctly, you're talking about the right front frame up to what we actually do is we put a bar that goes from the right front frame and it goes at an angle right above the transmission, center of the transmission, which the bracket that we put on the frame right there is right where the pull bar bracket is mounted. So we kind of, we use this theory. We kind of use this theory that I try to get it so that all of the direction of the angles and the load goes from the right front to the left rear. And I want to try to make sure that those are connected in some way or another in some phase or way of doing it. So that's what I've always recommended doing, and we've always run a tube there because, like I said, what it does is the right front frame, when it flexes up, I want it to try to not unload the left rear, keep the load on the left rear in the frame itself as far as the way the frame flexes. Hi, Bob and Chad. We have a sport mod that runs good on the top to middle of the racetrack, but when we run the bottom, the car wants to push bad. Any conditions to help the run on the bottom? 4-bar car. Sport mod car with a 4-bar car. Well, to run the bottom, you definitely are going to need more steer. More than likely, the car's rolling on the right rear a little hard because when you go in on the bottom of the racetrack, the car's going to roll to the right harder. More than likely, maybe a little bit less panhard bar in the car might help to free it up. The other thing that you could do, like I said, though, is put a little bit more steer in the car, like your right lower trailing arm. Maybe increase the angle of that slightly so that when the car steers, it puts that right rear back. That's not uncommon for a car to get to the point, and when it's pushing and the right front's braking traction, that's telling you that the right rear has got way more traction than the right front does. So you just need to try to tune accordingly. Free the car up a little bit more, put a little bit more steer in it. Possibly, and when you run the bottom of the racetrack, you're not going as fast. So it's very possible to run the bottom. You might want to try a softer right front spring, to get the car in and over on the nose a little bit more. Forex Merritt, how are you? Gosh, I haven't even talked to you since Super Nationals, and we were so busy at Super Nationals, I didn't really get to have our normal Super Nationals half-hour conversation on the world and the politics part of things and all the good stuff that we normally talk about. I kind of missed that, so I apologize, Rex. I didn't make time to visit with you as much as I'd like to. My old buddy Rex is always a great one. He's got a lot of wisdom, been around a long time. I'm not saying that he's old, I'm just saying he's been around a long time. He's one of those guys that has a lot of those experiences and memories and things that have happened. So Rex is always a pleasure to talk to. Matt, IMC rules state you cannot pin a spring with the shock, but if you are running a 100-pound spring on the left rear or less, aren't you pinning the spring? Well, I don't know that rule right off the top of my head, Matt, so I probably shouldn't actually say. But you are you are right when you're saying you're trying to pin that spring. Your biggest thing is, yeah, I don't know the rule well enough to know that I better not go in that direction because I might say something that's not correct. Is Chad having good luck with the spring bar with purple pucks in it, or how many nights can you get on it before needing to replace those pucks?
Yeah, we've been having good luck with, we're building an AFCO or an IBOC progressive pull bar. The 600 2000 spring is a really good spring. Been around for a long time. Kind of trending again, coming back. The pull bar stuff kind of goes in swings, and who's got the hot new trick set up, and springs are making a little bit of a comeback. They on an IMCA car they decel harder, so you got to do a little bit more to control that decel motion. But the springs are still a consumable. I wouldn't run them more than 25, 30 nights. Depending on how hard you are, or if it's a UMP car traveling on a lot, IMCA car not traveling it much. So I'd say the range is probably 25 to 35 nights, depending on your track conditions. But definitely been a good piece. Really tunable. Springs are a lot easier to work on, a lot less maintenance than per se like our closed can bars where you're greasing them and that kind of stuff. So a little more maintenance with that style pull bar, but the spring bar is doing really good.
Yeah, that's a very nice pull bar. What are the thing I like about I like the combination spring bar and puck bar, which, they, like you said, it's kind of the same situation where we've had versions of that years ago that worked pretty decent. I think the big problem was back in that point, we didn't have good quality pucks. I think the spring did its job, but the part where we were missing was the pucks. And now that unit that you've got with those pucks, at least you get life out of those pucks. So it makes that thing much more universal. And the advantage to the spring bar, the spring bar gets you traction quicker. The biscuits get you traction longer. So it's kind of working together with that part where you're using the best of both worlds to try to traction this thing up and to get traction quicker and longer. What are the best changes to make to get forward bite and side bite on a sport mod? Well, that's a long question, Shannon. The thing, once again, forward traction is angling that left bar, getting the car set up with the amount of left rear bite that you need. Side bite's pretty much going to be tuning it with your Panhard bar, adding a little bit more angle, those type of things. Without going into a whole lot of detail and asking a whole lot of questions, that's the best thing I can tell you, is putting more angle in that left rear trailing arm, moving it a little further away from the rear end so that it has more leverage on that left side. Your upper link on the rear end itself, you could move that with an IMCA car. You've got to be within the sides of the drive shaft, so I'd move it to the left as much as I could and still be within the rules. So those would be some good ideas. A Panhard bar is going to be your side bite. So maybe adding just a little bit more angle to the Panhard bar is going to help your side bite there. Keep in mind, though, sometimes when we try to get too much side bite, that kills forward bite. So just understand that. Mark, we got our shocks. I appreciate that. Aaron Ashley did too. You guys do good work. Well, I appreciate that, Brent. How's everything going up there in the great state of Wisconsin? I haven't seen or talked to you guys actually for quite some time. Hope everything's going well. Cody, soft left rear spring on a sport mod or stiff left rear. This Razor car I got won all the races with 25C, had stiff left rear, What's the advantage of going to the soft? I'm scared to change things. Well, Cody, I'm right there with you. There's nights where that soft spring setup is killer. On certain racetracks, it's definitely got some advantage, but there's also nights where I don't think it's as consistent. In a 10-night program, I just truly believe I've seen those cars be more iffy. You know, when they're on, and when they're not on, they're not on. I still think there's going to be more to that. It's something that we're definitely going to work on more next year. We ourselves as a company didn't experiment a lot with that soft left rear spring, and I think that there's some things there, depending on how we can get around or what we can deal with the rules and do what we've got to do there to get that done. Anything other than a sport mod, like a USRA car where you'd have a slider, it's a whole different deal because then you kind of set it up more like what a four-link car is. On a pull bar, what works best, spring style or bevel washer style?
So I don't know what you run there, Mark, but the Belleville washer is not legal in IMCA. We do have a Belleville washer in our puck bars, but it's just a single separator. So our full Belleville washer bar is only legal in like UMP, Wissota. What I like about the Bellevilles is they act linear like a spring, but they decel like a puck because they're smaller. There's not as much material to build the decel effect. So the Belleville bar is pretty cool. One of my favorites, but mainly open racing. It's not as tunable. You basically put them in there and preload a little bit, and it is what you got. So you got 1.25 inches of travel, and that's pretty much all you can do to it. So the tunability of the spring bar, like I said before, is pretty awesome. It's exposed, so you can see it real good. You can put packers in the inside bump stops or inside bumps, pucks, and then tune the preload easy. So I'd say the big spring bar wins tunability. And the Belleville washer, it's a pretty good piece also, but only legal in open cars.
Yeah, and I think Mark has a Wissota car.
Okay, it'd be legal there
then. Can you explain spring table and how does the drop cup on the right front affect the spring table? I'm going to let you have that one, Chad.
I still don't have my front drawing from Mr. Billy Steinberg, but
we're going to have to talk to him on these drawings. I'm still waiting on my stock car spring table one.
We get busy, and then all Chad's stuff gets pushed to the side.
Well, how does this deal work?
I don't know. I've lost control, Bob.
Jeez.
So spring table is determined by where the spring is mounted. So on that drop cup, when you lower the mounting point, like on the front, with that ball going down inside the spring cup, if that point is lower on the right side, the car rolls over easier because the location is lower in the car. So if you think about it like a teeter-totter, so if the right side's higher than the left side, it's not going to roll over. If the right side's lower, it's going to roll over easy, and if it's level, then it's kind of neutral. So the spring table is sometimes confusing. So on that front spring, it's where the screw jack is. On a sport mod stock car in the rear, it's where the screw jack is, and on a coilover car, it's where the coilover hooks to the frame. So, but lower on the right will induce roll.
And what Chad means, though, is still where the screw jack is, but we're talking about where the screw jack actually mounts in relationship to the top of the spring. So by having that drop cup, which is what, 1.5 inches drop?
2.5.
2.5 inch drop.
Yeah.
The actual pivot point of that jack bolt is where the actual roll or the spring table comes from on that particular unit. So that's where a lot of people get confused, where the top of the spring is still the same, but the spring doesn't know that. It knows where that pivot point is in that front spring.
But if you put a shorter spring in and have the drop cup, that's like
Exactly.
yeah. So
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Factory stock rear spring and stagger for dry. Slick. Well, one thing I believe as far as stagger goes, one of the biggest things, and that's is just my opinion, but I think people take too much stagger out of these cars for when it's dry. What happens is we take stagger out, so we have zero stagger, and then all of a sudden we go in and we're too tight. The car doesn't want to turn, doesn't want to rotate on it, and so now we're scrubbing traction, which once we start scrubbing traction, we gain right rear heat or tire heat, period. And then all of a sudden, over the course of time, the tire gets too hot and it doesn't want to drive like it's supposed to, and the car's not free. So it actually loses speed in phase two of the corner. Spring wise, in the rear of a factory stock car, I still like that soft, where I can run like a 16-inch left rear spring. I still would run that 125, and then I'd still run my 250 or whatever in my right rear. I think that works real well because you can put more load and keep that spring loaded a little bit more. You cannot preload against this. Okay, you cannot preload the spring against the shock. If you preload the left rear at full drop, you are loading against the chain, which is fine. The issue, the rule, is the right front. You cannot run a short shaft. Yeah, that's actually true. What they want to do is they want to be able to, when you pull into the tech area, they want to make sure that those shocks can completely unhook without any load on them. And they don't want any shock on the car having actually any load where you're loading against the shock. Tom, hey, Bob and Chad, it was awesome meeting you guys at Boone and still watching your class online. Well, I appreciate it, Tom. We like to make sure that you guys are watching, and we enjoy doing this. We have a lot of fun. We're going to what we're getting ready to do, of course, now at BHE here and RTI, we're getting ready for our schools. Don't forget, we have all of our 2020 schools are online, and they are available to be purchased at this point in time. So we're getting ready for the schools, and so we'll be kind of talking about that stuff coming up. Hopefully we'll get some guest speakers on here with us in the future. And then once we get into January, we'll go back to every other week like we were before. But for sure, we'll be the 8th of November and the 6th of December. And then more than likely, we'll throw another one in there. We'll probably do 2 in November in December, just because December is one of them months you just, I'm not going to be going to PRI this year. Chad's not going to PRI, so we need to be talking race cars for all you guys that aren't going to PRI or aren't going to some of that stuff, because by that point in time, we'll probably have cold weather. I mean, if we still have 80 degrees weather when it's December, this is going to be weird. But anyway, hi, Bob and Chad. We have an IMCA car, and we've been putting duct tape on the lower arm to see how it's been hitting the frame. Should we never see it hit? I figure a rough racetrack, you'll see contact. In my opinion, you put a piece of tape underneath there, and if your car is working perfect to the point where you think it's handling the best it could be, you should be able to see where that just touched. Now, if it's got a big gouge in it, that's telling you that you're bottoming out, and that's causing, once that bottoms out, it breaks traction at right front. The car's going to go into a perfect skate. But in my opinion, when I've had cars where I felt the car was really, really good, it just, at some point throughout the feature, it just nicked that tape. And I thought that setup was pretty good. Okay, guys, we got 5 more minutes. We got a few more questions we can answer here. So not set up related, but what oil do you guys recommend for the Saginaw 3-speed? Boy, Troy, I'm not a mechanic, and I couldn't. I don't know, maybe Chad, maybe I wouldn't have a.
I'm going with Dustin there in the Amsoil Synchro Mesh. Couple guys down. I don't know what you, but I like Amsoil stuff.
I know as much as that's what I would go with because he's got more information than I do.
I don't know if the Schaefer guy is still watching or not, but he could recommend something. He was watching earlier, but
yeah. IMCA modified. What adjustments to 4-bar would you make from a tacky racetrack to a dry slick racetrack on a dusty racetrack? Well, as far as adjusting the links, I'd probably contemplate dropping the right lower bar on the frame, possibly raising it on the cage, get a little bit more side bite, a little bit more traction off the corner. The rest of the time, I'm not really sure I would make a lot of bar changes. Normally, we change the right rear shock and go to a right rear slick type shock for the dry slick conditions, and then make that bar change where we in fact, I actually don't drop it on the frame. I actually raise it on the cage itself. RM, hey guys, how are you guys doing out there? Hey guys, we are running a J-bar in the center. What will it do when we move it up or down? Well, when you move the J-bar up or down, it's going to definitely change the side bite, or it's going to move the rear roll center of the car is what it's going to do. If you raise it up, the car is going to get freer. If you lower it, the car is going to get tighter. Chad, sweet hat, where can I get one of those?
Yeah, give us a call. We just got these in Friday. These are our 1620 hats. They're pretty awesome. They fit really good. Made in America. We got them for our West Coast guys because they're kind of a bigger flat bill one. But I'm from the West Coast of Wisconsin, so I think Cody Laney said that's okay. I can wear it.
We always refer back to the chassis builder when discussing front roll centers. Can we discuss a little about roll center adjustment, left to right, lowering and raising, maybe starting a good point? Chris, that's a great question, but that would be over an hour in itself discussing that. Adjusting the roll center, you can change pin heights on your ball joints. You can do things like that. And that definitely adjusts it. You move the roll center further to the left, the car is going to roll over on the right front a little bit harder. You move it to the right, it's going to roll a little bit less. And once again, when you do move that, you're more than likely going to change the height of it. The higher the roll center is, the less it's going to roll. The lower the roll center is, the more it's going to roll. There's a lot of programs out there that are pretty good programs where you can input a bunch of information, but if your chassis builder, which I'm sure he has done his job and done it very well, I don't know if I would mess with that stuff. You can do so much more with shocks and springs and tunability to your car. The roll center would be a major, major change. So I highly recommend against that, but if you wanted to try it, just, get a couple of different ball joints and try some different pin heights, and you'll definitely see what it can do. Going up or down on the left lower on the cage, what does it do on an IMCA modified? I'll let you have that one, Chad.
I'm sorry, I was reading that other comment down below. Which one are you on?
Going up or down on the left lower on the cage, what does it do on an IMCA modified?
Up or down on the cage is roll steer. So down on the cage is going to be more roll steer. It's going to free the car up and make it turn through the middle better.
Tim's got your Schaefer's number 240. Do you recommend a drop cup or a shorter spring on the right rear also? Spring on top.
Since you
Well,
run the shorter spring generally is enough,
yeah.
right?
The downside, and this is once again my opinion, but you've got 13-inch springs. I almost believe that we would need a 12-inch spring on the right rear. I think the 11-inch, going from a 13 to 11-inch, and I'm assuming that this is a, wait a minute here. I guess, Kevin, would you answer the question? One thing I've got a question is, what is this? Is this a sport mod, stock car, or a modified? So if you could answer that back, I would be better. Spring on top, I'm leading to believe that this is probably
Sport mod.
a sport mod. Going to the 11-inch spring, I almost think is too far. So that's kind of where the new style rears upper mounts have a 1-inch, they're like a 1-inch drop, aren't they?
You're talking the rigid cups?
Yeah, the rigid cups are a 1-inch drop.
Well, if you put the two cups in the rear side to side are the same, then
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
both the rear cups are the same. We're talking about making a drop cup that would be 2.5 drop, but
I
it's
don't think we
probably,
need to go that far. If we could get another inch would be ideal.
I was going to say it's probably extreme. That's why we're trying to figure out what to do if the
Now,
tall
the
same
2.5,
spring.
because what we're, in my opinion, what we really need is a 13-inch and a 12-inch spring, but nobody makes a 12-inch spring.
Ben, are you watching?
Because the 11-inch spring, in my opinion, the 2-inch drop on the right rear of a sport mod is too much.
Too much.
1 inch, in my opinion, would be perfect. Okay, USRA B mod, yes, that would make sense. So I answered that correctly. In my opinion, you know, at least with your USRA B mod, you can go from a 16-inch to a 13-inch spring, which, in my opinion, still having a 13-inch right rear spring is not too bad. That worked out really well because that's what we used to use on our IMCA cars all the time. And then they took away that rule and we had to run 13-inch. We couldn't run a 16-inch spring, but you can. Now, granted, that is a 3-inch drop, but that doesn't seem to affect the car near as much as that short 11-inch spring does. Like on an IMCA car, a lot of guys run it, but I think it's too severe. Okay, we've got one more question. We got Brian's question we'll answer, and then we are out of time. Going up or down on the left lower on the cage, what does it do on us? We already answered that one, didn't we? Eric, stock car, what kind of toe do you prefer when the right front is down? I'd like to see 5/8 of an inch, to be honest with you. At least a half an inch. If you can get it so it toes out that far, would be fine. That I think would work really well. Cade, RTI classes really paid off. We had a great year. BHE shocks and products kept us running up front all year. This young kid, for those of you who don't know, this young man and his dad built their own stock car. And this is not heard of in today's time. Second in national points, won 2 track championships, and then I don't know how many races, I think 16, 17 races. And he runs out in Nebraska with Graybo and all those guys. So it's not like he doesn't have some serious competition. Cade, you did an awesome job, and you and your dad do a great job, and we're glad that you're representing our products because you guys just do such an awesome job. All right, guys. Don't forget, the RTA classes are available. They are online, so start making plans to attend the sport mod class or the modified class or the stock car class. And we'll come back and we will be talking to you on November 8th. Thanks again for watching. We really appreciate it. I enjoy doing this with Chad every other week or every month or whenever we actually get to do it, because we haven't done it since Super Nationals. But I always enjoy it and I have a great time.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.